So, welcome back to everyone. I would like now to introduce Urbantide and with their uSmart Zero platform. And Simon, the stage is yours.
Great, thanks very much, Fabio. Right, I'll just get my screen shared, and then we've got quite a few speakers today, so it'll be a good chance just to check that everybody's here as well. Great, can you just see my screen first off? Perfect. Great, so yeah, quick introduction to myself. So I'm Simon Tricker, and I'm going to be leading through the presentation today and really discussing our project, which is called uSmart Zero, and it's really around supporting fuel poor households through data integration and AI. And I'm joined by a number of my colleagues who are also working on this project. So I'll do quick introductions. Stevie.
Hi, thanks, Simon. Yeah, I'm Stevie Revel. I'm also co-founder of Urbantide, and I've been the project manager for this data innovation project. Pass over to you, Helen.
Yeah, hi, I'm Helen Tartaglia, and I have been leading on the user engagement on behalf of Connected Places Catapult and Urbantide.
Great, and Matt?
Yeah, hi everybody, Matt James. I lead on business development at DCC and working on DCC's wider system data initiative.
Great, and Heather?
Hi, I'm Heather Stevenson. So I've been connecting to the local authorities across the Greater South East Energy Hub.
Great, and Chris?
Hi everyone, Chris Taylor, environmental economist at Connected Places Catapult, looking at the benefits evaluation.
Great, thanks very much, Chris. And Ellen's not able to join us today, but she's been working from UCL and supporting us with data validation. So, yeah, thanks very much for the opportunity to present where we're up to really today. Just a quick summary of the plan. We've got quite a lot to get through, so should be about 20 minutes presentation. And then we've got some time for questions. So effectively, just want to go through a bit more of a quick introduction to what the program's all about and a quick update on where we're up to. Then a deeper dive into the user engagement, and then also into the broader policy around from DCC. Then we get into the data science research that we've been developing and delivering and how that's been validated with UCL. And then a quick overview of the product, where that's going, how that's been developing, and then into the deeper product testing that we're doing and the wider evaluation. So without further ado, our core concern, our core challenge that we're trying to solve is really this increasing risk around fuel poverty. And obviously with the increase in energy pricing coming through, this is only going to grow. So there's a kind of a real need to really try and help more local authorities and more organizations to try and do a better job in trying to support the growing number of households that are going to be affected. So really our phase 2 was really kind of doing a deeper dive into understanding the customer needs. And that's from a local authority perspective, from the energy hubs, managing agents, energy companies, and network operators, who are all trying to support and reduce the amount of fuel poverty that we have in this country. And one of the key pieces of that puzzle was really the integration of smart meter system data and how we could use that to generate new insights and new intelligence, and we've started to get some good results in that area. But it's obviously important that we do this ethically. So how is that data going to be used, have permission to use that, and also that we validate it. And that's where DCC and UCL have really kind of come in to support and to help us ensure that. And ensure that we have the appropriate use for using that data. So we'll get into that a little bit later with Matt. So just a quick overview really of what our kind of 2-phased projects were about. So phase 1 was really the feasibility study, like could we identify households? And then phase 2 was starting to progress that into the wider area of intervention and impact. But what we've really had to do in phase 2 as well is really do a much deeper dive into the identification models. So we're on good track with that. And then as we're kind of progressing through that, the identification, then into what is the intervention, and then how do we assess the impact of those solutions. So I'll just hand over now to Helen, who will talk through a bit more about the work that we've done on the user engagement.
Brilliant, thank you. So the purpose of phase 2 really was to validate and bring a lot more kind of detail to the use cases we developed in phase 1. And this was really about making sure the tool was not only innovative, but of course also genuinely useful for users and kind of reaching people in fuel poverty. So we spoke to about 50 stakeholders from across the UK over the course of three-hour workshops. And then did over 6 hours worth of synthesis to lead us to the following kind of findings and recommendations. Next slide, please. Brilliant. So we found that data-driven identification would be particularly helpful for under-resourced local authorities in order to enable them to better deliver fuel poverty schemes and initiatives to the citizens that needed them the most. We also found that there was a really kind of clear interest and want to be able to measure the effectiveness of fuel poverty schemes using data such as smart meter system data. We also found the above 2 use cases would be useful in terms of bid readiness and supporting successful grant applications, as well as encouraging kind of wider citizen engagement and sign up for retrofits. So the ability to have data that showcases how retrofit has been successful for other citizens would therefore encourage other people to sign up as well. Next slide, please. So our recommendations, we're really interested to see what comes from the pilot. This will provide kind of even more in-depth and real-world user insight. We also kind of strongly recommend investigating how the uSmart Zero tool can be used to measure the impact of initiatives. We see this as being quite a strong second use case and something that would add a lot of value. We recommend kind of the more granular the data available to the tool, the better. This will really support local authorities who are based in dense cities and mixed income areas. And above and beyond all of this, just keeping in mind that the value of the tool really lies in converting identification into uptake. So keeping in mind that this is about kind of reaching net zero and reducing fuel poverty. Thank you very much.
Great, thanks, Helen. I'll just hand over now to Matt, who'll talk a bit more around the policy landscape.
Yeah, thanks, Simon. So clearly, better use of data is a key policy priority, both at national levels, the industrial strategy and the national data strategy, but also clearly within the energy sector, and hence the modernising energy data programme and this competition. But against that context, we've been working on a wider data access initiative, which we've badged Data for Good, and really the main aim of that is to try and maximise access to smart meter system data for public interest purposes. We're trying to enable a series of use cases for system data access, and helping to reduce fuel poverty is a really key one, is the lead one that we're working on. And then that in itself is aligned to policy and industry priorities. So BEIS, the Committee on Fuel Poverty, Ofgem, and Energy UK are all championing better use of data, and in some cases explicitly smart meter data to help tackle fuel poverty. So that's just a bit about the context. We just skip on a slide, Simon. And then, so in terms of smart meter system data use and how we've approached that in practice, so the rollout's progressing really well now. There's more than 18 million devices installed on the network, and combined that system is generating near to 1 billion messages to and from those connected devices. So what we've been looking at for this project is a subset of that data, so particularly combining device IDs and transactions relating to prepayment and low credit. And then Urbantide are using that to try and understand inferences that can be drawn about the prevalence of fuel poverty in geographic areas. Really important that we take a robust approach to data privacy, but whilst maintaining some utility in that data. And so to do that, what we've done, we've anonymized any personal data. So device IDs are replaced with a random identifier, and that's actually, the link is deleted at the point of data generation. We've also aggregated the data. So whilst there's anonymous individual records in there, they're actually aggregated to lower super output areas. so around 600 homes within those regions at the moment. And then finally, we've obfuscated the time and the date of messages. So we've been pretty strict in terms of the measures. We're fairly confident there's really no risk of consumer harm, but there is still value in the data in terms of the development of the model.
Great, thanks very much.
I think that's everything from me, Simon.
Great. Right, I'll just hand over to Stevie and talk through a bit more about the data science approach.
Great, thank you guys. Yeah, so as Matt mentioned there, it's a very extensive data set. You can see on the right hand side some of the sort of high level counts of the number of meters that are involved in some of the analysis and some of the analysis subsets. So lots of data there, messages such as top up, low credit, emergency credit, which gives massive opportunities for data science approaches. So we've done a lot in terms of exploration and quality control. In looking at the data in the first instance, there's a need to understand the data itself, and we've identified, for example, the removal of holiday homes. We have really small numbers, we're assuming holiday homes, things like that. We have really small numbers of kind of top up frequency or things like that, or apparent system errors where lots of messages are being generated kind of at the same time. So a bit of quality control on the data itself. And then we've gone about and applied so far 8 different sort of methodological approaches from a data science point of view. So, lots of different things, regression, clustering, etc. So LSTM, the long short-term memory networks. And one of the clustering approaches in the hidden Markov model is the one where we found something that indicates effectively the best results to help us enable predictive modeling into the future as well. So next slide, Sam. Thanks. So if you look at the Markov model, what it does is it's looking at how basically things transition between states. So assuming a state is being in credit, for example, or being in emergency credit, a second state, the machine learning algorithms is able to put out the fact that in this subset area, there's a certain number of devices that are always in credit. So the state actually doesn't really change. There's also devices that go from credit to emergency credit and back, ones that go to disconnected, and also a big group of states that, where it's kind of a completely random, really, the actions in that. And that enables us to understand the DCC data and linking that with other components of data that are available to be able to then predict fuel poverty, to understand where poverty is and predict that forward. And so you get to this point where you're understanding state change, breakdown, and you can use that to, for example, predict forward. So whilst we need more seasons of data because this data set's building, so the opportunity is getting bigger, you're in a position where you're able to look forward effectively on potential changes such as energy price rises. So if the cost of energy goes up, how will that then impact on these states, and how will it impact on the eventual, ultimate fuel poverty situation in these areas? And another thing to point out, which is pretty obvious, of course, but is a strong correlation between the prepayment existence and high deprivation deciles, which is another factor that can be used then to predict forward. I'll move to the final slide on this section, Si. So just to point out then, the output area is something that we'd like to get more kind of data on, more granular data than the LSOA, working within Matt's process that he's mentioned before, which would hopefully enable more advanced prediction. Also, as the data set continues to grow, the opportunity is actually getting bigger and better, and the analysis should improve again. So we've just got to the point where there'll be 2 years of data now. Obviously, in a couple of years' time, we'll have double that, and there'll also be more meters online. So you're getting much more data. So I think proving this as a use case is really valid, and it's only going to get better and iterate and improve as time goes on. The next slide. So I'm just going to also pick up on Ellen's points here from a SERL point of view. So they are doing the validation of our algorithmic findings effectively. So SERL, Smart Energy Research Laboratory, is a 6 million funded EPSRC program, and they've got 15,000 participants signed up providing their smart meter data other data, and also information about them as kind of householders through the household survey. Within that, so grouped those together and were able to categorize their population into 3 different fuel poverty groups, sort of high, medium and low risk, with the self-reporting factor of how people felt about their financial well-being being quite an important component of their model. So if we move on to the next slide, we can kind of see the comparison of the 2 different model types. So if you look straight at the diagram on the right-hand side, you can see SERL's breakdown in terms of people at high risk, medium risk, low risk, and the comparison with Urbantide. What we've been working on since this validation was completed in early December, and there'll be a new validation again coming for the end of February in line with the programme. But what we've been working on is trying to understand, we think our model is quite harsh effectively, or firmly states that people are in fuel poverty or out of fuel poverty. Whereas the SERL model looks as if it's got a broader middle. You know, there's more scope to be in the middle, medium risk, whereas ours is quite harsh at defining no, that is or isn't. So we're looking at ways that we can basically soften that a little bit, such as just because somebody's going into emergency credit and back out again doesn't necessarily mean that they're in fuel poverty. There might be other factors that are at play in that as well. So it's just about softening that rather than being so harsh. And fingers crossed, you know, we'll be online with the predictive accuracy levels for the end of the month as well. And I think that's it. So I'll pass back over to you. Thanks
very much. So then with those different models, we're then starting to build out our product suite. So we're utilizing uSmart, which is our data innovation platform. And this effectively allows us to collect any data from any source. So obviously there's a number of different data sets and data sources that we're putting together here. And then also the good thing about uSmart is also enables good data sharing and the ability to then present the different insights. So a number of different dashboards and views on that data set. And really a kind of core principle of ours is to ensure that they align with the UN sustainability goals. So this project is obviously aligns very well on a number of those different dimensions. And then just a quick kind of look at how this is developing from a UI and UX perspective. So effectively, we're going to have a kind of map-based interface, which will have the different LSOA levels of information, and then a number of different ways of filtering that information, and then different ways of presenting the data analysis and the data science visualizations will then be presented on the right-hand side. And we'll have a number of different drop-downs, so linking EPC data as well as other fuel poverty metrics. And then importantly, we've also allowed the ability for those different quadrants, those different LSOA levels to be saved and then can be exported easily or can be hooked up via an API. So trying to make it as easy as possible to make sure the data can be reused. And then importantly then is how is it going to be used? So I'll hand over to Heather from the Great South East Energy Hub, who will talk a bit more about the plan to use it.
Thank you, Simon. So the Energy Hub is working on a number of different retrofit projects at the moment. We have 136 local authorities in our area, and we've got quite a big task locating fuel poor households to deliver a retrofit to, which over the next year and a bit will probably involve targeting over about 10,000 homes. So knowing where those homes are and finding ways to find them sort of more simple process is really important to us. Next slide, thank you. So we've been working with different local authorities and delivery partners in our area to see how the tool can be tested. And for example, in Suffolk, the county and district councils work together doing retrofit, and they're looking to see how the tool could be compared against their current delivery planning processes that they are already in place, to see if there's additional properties that they can find, or ease of finding properties in terms of their retrofit planning. And then another area, our main delivery partner, Warmworks for the Hub, are also very keen on using community referrals routes. So we're looking at how Essex Citizens Advice Bureau can use the tool as a sort of test space for area-based targeting, which they're looking to feed into the identification of fuel poor households for a retrofit scheme. And the details of how the testing of the tool will be done, I'll leave to Chris to explain. Thank you.
Great, over to you, Chris.
Thanks, Heather. Thanks, Simon. So the benefits evaluation approach is centered around 3 particular questions arising from the previously mentioned stakeholder engagements and the project's theory of change logic model, which is kind of summarized here. What this does is set out the intended benefits across different stakeholder groups and across different time periods from short term to long term. Next slide, please, Simon. So a key logical flow is highlighted here in yellow. Appreciate that the text is quite small, but it essentially drives the evaluation questions we aim to answer in 3 areas. Firstly, to what extent the tool helps energy hubs with better strategic targeting of local authorities to work with. Secondly, to what extent it helps local authorities and county councils, as Heather's mentioned, with better operational on-the-ground targeting of homes to receive energy measures and drive that vital uptake. And then the flip side to that, for the householders, to what extent they can gain better access to energy efficiency campaigns with the resultant health, comfort, carbon, fuel bill benefits that's intended to bring. Next slide, please. So there's a trial scheduled from 22nd of February involving county councils, Suffolk and Essex, and the research design is around collecting metrics on household contacts and confirmation of eligibility with associated efforts and marketing costs. Next slide, please. So by having the local authorities and county councils follow this approach, which is firstly use the current process, and as colleagues have mentioned, this can be through social media, community champions, EPC ratings, etc. And then follow the same process again using uSmart 0 in the same areas, we can get that comparison between the baseline and the intended benefits that the tool can bring. And summarized down the bottom are just some of those expected benefits we're looking to gain data into, either societal, like better uptake of energy efficiency campaigns, and private benefits to local authorities from cost and effort benefits, etc. Thanks very much. Back to you, Simon.
Great, thanks very much, Chris. So yeah, in summary, on this project, I mean, we can see there's obviously a growing need for better data-driven intervention to really support more households, especially with the impending price rises. So we're really looking forward to diving into our user testing through March, April, and then planning to launch in May our kind of alpha product. And so we're currently seeking more user testers, really, to ensure that what we're developing is valid and supporting as many different organizations as possible. So if you're on this call today and you're interested in finding out more, then please get in touch with Suzanne, who's our partnership manager, or obviously ourselves right now as well. So thanks very much for the opportunity to present today. And back to you, Fabio, for questions.
Thank you. Thank you, Simon, and to all the speakers for this very nice presentation. We have a first question related to your models. So have you tried combining your models? This often improves upon any individual models.
Yes, Stevie, do you want to talk through a bit more around the process?
Yeah, sure. We have talked about it, Stephen, about combining the models. We've concentrated on kind of getting the data to UCL and ourselves from DCC so far, so that's been the priority. In terms of combining the models, I think we would need to check just to make sure that we're not going to be sharing things that we shouldn't share from the GDPR point of view. With SERL knowing the data that they have and the device IDs that they have, if they were to link it to the device IDs that we have, we could then create, unfortunately, data about that individual. So we need to be really careful in that. But I think, yeah, it's a good idea. And once we get kind of February out the way, hopefully the improved validation, I think we've got more opportunity to explore that.
Thank you, Stevie. And in relation to your the systems data that you are using, one question is the implementation, well, this is not related to system data, but is the implementation of the mark-wide half-hourly settlement and the changes to the data access framework resulting from Ofgem, from the changes that Ofgem is mandating? Do you think that this implementation will increase access to half-hourly consumption data?
So it's probably a bit Stephen, Matt. Yeah, Matt. Yeah, if you could dive in first, that'd be great.
Yeah, sure. Well, so as you said, Fabio, this project is actually looking at smart meter system data rather than what's inside the messages, so consumption data. But in terms of half-hourly settlement, as I understand, that won't actually change the access regime to consumption data, but that is something that we're looking at in parallel. And one of there are recommendations, some of the work of the Public Interest Advisory Group, Smart Meter Public Interest Advisory Group, and actually the Energy Digitalisation Task Force as well are all starting to champion access, particularly to aggregated consumption data in easier ways. So we're hoping that will come in time.
And Matt, since you were touching on this point, could the methodology that you are currently applying that involves anonymization, aggregation, and obfuscation, could it be applied to consumption data as well, or why not in case it couldn't?
So I think those kind of techniques could be applied, and certainly distribution networks, for example, have started to access consumption data at an aggregated, anonymized basis. We at DCC ourselves don't have the technical ability to see inside those messages. So that's why we're focusing on system data, which is the data set that we have visibility of.
But do you think that another type of stakeholder could safely access smart meters consumption data applying those methodologies?
I think so. Again, there are kind of some really key recommendations coming out relating to the need for and channels through which aggregated smart meter data could be accessed more broadly.
Right, clear. Thank you, Matt. And one question that I had on the capabilities of the platform, is it possible to export the data that are resulting, the derived data, so the data that is resulting from your analysis, to other platforms? Or like, for instance, what was presented by the previous speakers or some of the platforms that have been presented in the event yesterday? Is this a functionality that uSmart Zero currently has, or?
Yeah, completely. I think probably myself and Steve can take that. Yeah, so that's definitely the goal. We want to, we're big advocates for trying to make data as interoperable as possible. So we really want to kind of encourage not only the outputting, but also the inputting of other data sets. So there's obviously localized information that, say, certain local authorities will have about their area. So how can we bring that in and then use that analysis? How can we then apply the new analysis on top of that? And then also, how can we export the data and make it easy to integrate into other systems and platforms that are currently being used? So yeah, I think there's a number of ways of doing that. We can see the simple way is, a lot of the requests have been just a CSV, would be super useful, and then others are more into sort of API integration. So we'll effectively enable both.
Right. Thank you.
Stevie?
Yeah, that's good. Yeah.
Yeah. And one last question from my side is, obviously, local authorities are one of the key end users of this platform, but do you think that there can be other type of end users that might be interested in this type of analysis?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, we're kind of exploring a number of different angles. So there's obviously the network operators and the energy companies also have obligations. to support vulnerable customers and fuel customers. So they're kind of part of our sort of stakeholders to as well, we're working to develop with. But then we can also start to see some other sort of newer markets starting to open up as kind of green mortgaging and those kind of things start to roll out or start to change or evolve. The other incentivizations for trying to encourage more retrofit solutions, because obviously the first phase, what we're really looking at is the fuel poor, so sort of the Pacific band. But then as we kind of look at the kind of squeezed middle that's going to obviously be affected, who may not get government support, but are still going to need help. So how do we help them to get help? So that's a kind of an interesting future project.
Thank you, Simon. And I received one other question. Well, given that given the current energy price crisis, given that this crisis will push more people into fuel poverty, have you seen an increase of interest in your application since the start of this crisis? And yeah, sorry, let's start from this.
Yeah, definitely. I think there's definitely more interest in in having something that's more data driven, and definitely starting to link the new novel data from DCC and the smart meter system data. And obviously, this project is really around demonstrating the potential of using those and linking those data sets. So yeah, there is definitely more interest. I think we're still quite early in our stages, we're still kind of in alpha development. So, and obviously we'll see as we get more data, how this, how that impact, the increase in pricing is going to impact more people.
Well, thank you, Simon. And yeah, thank you to all the speakers. I guess we have reached the end of this.
Hand up, Fabio. I don't know if you've already done.
I cannot see hands up.
Maria.
Yeah, we would encourage everyone to send your questions in the chat if possible. The hand up has disappeared. So maybe it was a legacy hand up. But yeah, so thank you, Stevie and Simon, and to all the speakers again, and also to the previous speakers. And yeah, we reached the end of this event. We will have another show and tell in June for the end of this competition, where all the projects, including uSmart Zero, will be presenting. And I hope to see all the participants and attendees there as well. And yeah, thank you very much. If you have any questions, please do not hesitate in contacting either us or the projects directly. And please keep following our progresses.